is we've done numerous brain scans to show that you can change your brain in 4 days for the better. 80% of 1,000 people had a more than 90% change in their brain for the better just by practicing meditation. We know that you can train your heart to work more coherently. That means that when you're angry, when you're frustrated, when you're impatient, your heart beats out of rhythm. That's how powerful you are. And it really suppresses certain genes. So then change your emotional state. Wow, you start to see people practicing this kind of regulation. So we have evidence that people can do that. We have evidence you can change your genes in 4 days. You can change your gene expression. You can make your immune system stronger by changing your emotional state. You can lengthen your life with just 60 days of meditation, 5 days a week. We've proven that you can lengthen your telomeres. So now you have evidence that common people can do the uncommon. You don't have to be a monk. You don't have to be a nun. You don't have to be a priest, an academic. The common people are beginning to wrap their minds around this and do the uncommon.
There's evidence. This isn't just mystical information.
So there it is. Science is that model. And then we have testimony. Like we have people that have healed themselves of stage 4 cancer, not once, not twice, not 3 times, and 4 times, over and over again. We have people that have healed themselves that were blind, that were deaf, that had tumors, that had Graves' disease, Hashimoto's syndrome, numerous Parkinson's patients, brain injuries, MS, rheumatoid arthritis, and rare genetic disorders.
Is this the stuff Jesus was doing back in the day? I mean, that's what I'm hearing, is curing blindness and stuff.
Well, no, if anybody is surprised, I have to tell you, Danny, it's me. I never thought I would see these kind of changes. Now you have evidence. You have evidence right now and testimony. So now evidence becomes the loudest voice, right? Yeah. So doctors now are saying, hey, you're not really responding to treatment. Why don't you try this? Now let me tell you why they're saying that. And that's because if you say, try this, and you see the evidence of people getting better, and the person's not responding to treatment, what else do you have? And doctors are now referring, oncologists are referring patients right to our office, right to our events, because it's an option for them.
When I got into your work, the thing that I found really interesting was that in some of the meditations and some of the subjective experiences that I would have and continue to have were very similar to Kundalini Yoga. And when I first started doing that practice, it was very transformative. And yet I would hear, the kind of grandfather of the teachings, Yogi Bhajan, talk about what was happening to the pineal gland, and you're raising your, extending your magnetic field and all this stuff. And even though it felt good, I couldn't help but think, kind of, this is bullshit, but I kept doing it. I just thought, well, he's just off on some trip. Then I get into your work and you're going, oh no, we are scientifically validating that this work with the energy centers, moving the energy, holding the breath, breathing, moving in certain ways, has this transformative healing effect.
Yeah, I mean, what I love about putting this all together is that more than likely, if you're studying with like a yogi master as an example, it's a very different bridge between languages. There's a language of this contemporary time, and then there's just language of something that was 5,000 or 2,000 or 10,000 years old, and the language doesn't translate a lot of times. So if we use science as that language, and we can build a model of understanding and make it biological and make it neurological and make it hormonal and make it electromagnetic and bridge those sciences of electromagnetism with heart coherence and brain coherence, and put together this probably a similar model, right? And the same effects, but have it in a different language. And I think science is that language. I knew that I'd have to first get in the present moment.
Yeah.
You know when someone's present with you in your life because they're paying attention. You know when they're not present with you, they're not paying attention. So this is an intelligence. I got to be present with it and create a very clear design. So then I would have to, what I knew from my background in hypnosis is I would have to slow my brain waves down, get beyond my analytical mind. Now, once I'm in that state, I would have a clear intention, a very clear intention and very clear focus. And when I started doing it well, my emotional state started to change. Instead of feeling frustrated, fearful, impatient, resentful, I was feeling joy and freedom, and because I was suppressing those emotional states every time I got present. Because those emotions bring us back to the past. So I had to work over time. And what I didn't know that I was doing the whole entire time was I was improving my brain's ability to pay attention and focus. That means I could visualize better.
Yeah.
But secondly, more importantly, I was able to relax more into the present moment. And by doing that and holding a very clear picture, I started to notice very strong changes in my brain. I was laying down new circuits. I was creating a new mind, and nerve cells that fire together wire together. If you keep doing it, just like driving a race car, it's going to get easier because you become what you practice. But you got to pay attention. You got to repeat it. You got to learn. You got to keep experiencing. So at the end of 6 weeks, it just kind of all came together. But those 6 weeks, I was struggling because it was just kind of this unlearning process. It was pruning neurological, breaking habits of thought and emotions. And then it worked. And so then I was back on my feet in 10 weeks. And then I just said if I was ever able to walk again, I'd spend the rest of my life studying the mind-body connection and mind over matter. And that's what I've been doing since 1986.
Yeah, I think we're at a really exciting time at the moment where you have these ancient traditions that have been known to be effective in transformation and healing, but we're oftentimes, inaccessible because they're a little too out there for your average Westerner, you know? And so...
And Westerners are practical people, right? And so they're going to want to understand, many people want to understand it before they leap, right? So when you talk tradition, when you talk culture, when you talk religion, and even words like kundalini or chakras or certain words will shut people off, or they'll have the wrong understanding of them, and so we do our best to rename them as something more biological, something more in the line of science, so that people get a fresh look at it, a fresh learning about it, and then they can kind of build their own understanding. But I think it's important really for people to just get science as that language.
Like, are we changing our DNA? Are we capable of changing our DNA?
Well, your body is a protein-producing machine. Muscle cells make muscle proteins called actin and myosin.
Do we need to eat protein, by the way? That's always something I wonder whether or not we really do. Okay.
Skin cells make skin proteins called collagen and elastin. Your immune system makes immune proteins called immunoglobulins or antibodies. Your stomach cells make stomach proteins called enzymes. Your eye cells make eye proteins called keratin. So the body's a protein-producing machine. Every cell in your body, Danica, makes a protein except for red blood cells. And in order for a cell to make a protein, a gene has to be signaled. So this is genes create disease. Less than 1% of the people on the planet are born with genetic conditions like type 1 diabetes, Tay-Sachs disease. The other 95 to 99%...
People want to hear that and people don't want to hear that.
Of course not, because that means you can't be a victim
Accountability.
anymore. You can't be a victim, right?
Exactly.
So 95 to 99% are created from lifestyle. You can take two identical twins, same exact gene expression, same exact genome. One dies at 55, the other one dies at 81. Why? They're in a different environment, or their perception of the environment. Right. So now it's not that the gene is a parts list of possibilities.
Right.
So now, here's the point. If a person is perceiving the environment or in an environment where they're constantly living in fear, or anxiety, or anger, or aggression, or frustration, then it makes sense then that those emotions would influence certain thoughts. And certain thoughts would make certain feelings or certain emotions. Well, if you're living by the same emotions every single day, it's the environment that signals the gene. The end product of an experience in the environment is an emotion. So your body is objective. If you're living in fear, whether there's any fearful conditions in your environment, your body's believing it's an environment where it needs to feel fear. So then the person then keeps signaling the same gene because they're feeling the same emotion. They're responding to the same environmental condition. They're signaling the same gene. You keep making the same protein. You keep signaling the same gene over time. It's like taking a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. All of a sudden, the body starts making a cheaper protein. The gene down-regulates, and now the body's moving out of balance.
It's interesting how you talk about the use of kaleidoscopes and that visual, the fractal patterns, and that's something that is obviously inherent to psychedelic experience. But I've also had experiences like that doing really deep breath work, And especially with those long holds when you're holding the spine and activating the center of your brain, and all of a sudden, you're seeing all of these. And so with this biochemical and light reaction and everything is happening, I'm assuming that this is very fertile ground for transforming the way you perceive your life and the way that you interact with your environment, right?
Yes.
The manifestation potential in this place is like you're the artist creating your life rather than your life circumstances creating you.
Yeah. And it's kind of interesting because all those fractal patterns are just information. Trees, everything we're seeing is information, but that's all sensory information material. Now an area awakens, and now you're seeing information, but it's not going to be physical. It's very organized information because that's coming from the 0-point field. And it's those patterns that actually make up all nature, all consciousness. Everything is fractal. Whether you're looking at a fern tree, the leaf on the fern tree, whether you're looking at the patterns in the brain, and you look at the lung tissue or kidney tissue, it's all fractal in nature, right? So we're seeing the physical manifestation of those fractal patterns, and now we're perceiving information before it's material. That kind of gets exciting, right? But you can't see that until you awaken those centers, until you awaken those areas. Yeah.
Right.
So it begs the question, new thoughts that lead to new choices that lead to new behaviors, new behaviors create new experiences produce new emotions are the information coming from the environment, they signal new genes, and there's evolution. So now we upregulate the gene, you start making a healthy protein. The immune system starts upregulating, and all of a sudden it makes new antibodies. Why? Because the body's back in growth and repair and out of survival. So we did a research study for 4.5 days. We took 35 randomly selected people, and we measured 7,500 different gene regulations. And what we want them to do is to think differently, make new choices, do different things, have new experiences, and feel new emotions. And we wanted to see in the end of 4.5 days if they were able to change their gene expression. And they had 8 genes in common. All of them shared the same gene expression of these 8 genes. 2 genes that suppress cancer growth and tumors. Genes to grow new neurons in your brain, not just make new connections, but grow new neurons. Genes that stimulate stem cells to go to damaged tissues that are dying and breaking down and repair them. Genes for oxidative balance, anti-cancer, anti-aging, anti-heart disease, anti-stroke.
They all had all the same ones?
These were the 8 they had in common, but there were other ones, that were great ones as well. But these 8 were the common ones. And genes to strengthen the cellular structure, the microtubules of the cell. Now, genes are like Christmas tree lights. They're turning on and off all the time. But if you're doing the same things, feeling the same emotions, thinking the same thoughts, you got the same lights on and the other lights off. And over time, you start signaling the very gene that's on the surface of your genetic propensity. And now you're headed in that direction. So then is it possible then when you change your emotional state, will you change your gene expression? And the answer is absolutely, that you are your own genetic engineer. Now, it may take some time for certain people.
So is gene expression different than changing your genes and actually...
Yeah, exactly.
Can you actually reprogram your DNA? Can you change your genes? Can you alter?
You can alter your gene expression. Now, here's an example. If your body's a protein-producing machine, you have 100,000 different proteins that make up your body. So you should have 100,000 genes for every one of those proteins.
Okay.
You have 40,000 what's called regulatory proteins that help make those. So now you should have 40 more genes. You should have 140,000 genes for 140,000 proteins. And when they mapped the human genome, they were so surprised that we only express 23,688 genes. So how's that possible? Because on one gene, you can have several variations of how the gene is expressing itself. So genes are always moving and mobile.
And from this place is where we're going to be able to generate that feeling of gratitude and love for a life experience that to our old mind before that experience appeared to be somewhere in the future as a remote possibility or not, but feeling a sensed experience as if that's already happened. I'm going back, I know this is inherent in your work, but I first found this concept, I think, with Greg Braden, maybe going back 15 years ago, of this lost mode of prayer, where you're not like, oh, God, give me this thing I want so I'm whole and complete.
Yeah.
But it's more like, thank you, Great Spirit, for bringing this thing into my reality, even though you don't quite see it yet.
Yeah. Well, again, that's the material world fools us every day back into separation. You got to stay really aware that you're not separate. And when you get really good at that, then your thoughts can really actually have effects, more profound effects, because those thoughts are really connecting you to everything. I mean, that's the cool part about it. So we want people to not pray in this work to have their prayers answered. We want them to get up as if their prayers are already answered. And it's that kind of energy that really begins to drop a big stone in the quantum. And I think it's cool that, people are starting to see these patterns and they see this information, because many people now are having those experiences. And I mean, that's why I created the kaleidoscope, because that was the best way I could describe. Of course, now there's so many more computer-generated images, but it was the best way I could describe it at the time. And they're so orderly that if you took a piece of it and the whole is still in the piece, it's just more orders, and there's never any separation there. That's coming from a realm beyond the speed of light. That's order, that's patterns. And when those patterns break down in our field, the expression of matter changes. So when the pattern becomes more coherent, you change it in the field. It's not matter that's emitting the field, it's the field that's slowing down and creating matter. You put a new pattern in there, you change the pattern in the field, you change matter. Then you see more wholeness in physical structure. So when I've had those experiences, and now a lot of people in our work have those experiences, the moment I see those patterns, I just know something amazing is going to happen, and I just relax into it, and I surrender, and I just open up, whatever that is, and that's again creating that inner vision. That's why the pineal is called the third eye. It should be called the first eye, because that's where we really see from.
Is there a certain timeline that you can establish to reprogram? Can you do that in a day? How long, if I said, hey, I want to change my personal reality by changing my personality, which means I'm going to change my thoughts, and that's inherently going to change my genes, because I'm creating new circuits, new patterns.
Right. Well, the answer is yes and no. We have people that have taken 4 years, as an example, that we've tracked, that reversed a genetic disorder that they had from a teenager.
Okay.
Turn that whole battleship around. Now, that person was abused as a child. Father was an alcoholic, beat her every day. She felt weak, punished. Of course, she developed a very specific bone disease that created a weakening bone tissue or scaffolding. That's an expression, right? So there were a lot of incidences that branded her emotionally, and she had to get beyond those emotions. Not the event, just the emotions. So someone like that, it took her maybe 2.5, 3 years to get through. Now, it's just like the 4-minute mile, or whatever
Which
you say.
I've never done.
Whatever you say in racing. But there's a ceiling where people said that was impossible, and all of a sudden human beings are doing it. So now.
Oh yeah, isn't there some story about it with a 4-minute mile? Once one person broke it, then the next year 20 did.
No,
and it's
that's right.
You literally
2
had
weeks
to.
Later, someone
there
broke
you go.
it, and then there's 1,400 people that have broken.
There you go.
Mile.
Because
and the doctors were saying it was impossible.
Explain how that works. What happened?
Well, it's in the field. You have one thing happening. There's a footprint that somebody stepped into in consciousness that says, oh my God, someone else did it, I can do it. At the same time, you're seeing the evidence in three-dimensional reality. There's a footprint in consciousness that the person can step into. It's in the field now. So the same thing's happening in our work. What was taking 3 years to happen 10 years ago or 8 years ago, in 1 week we're seeing people heal from the most incredible health conditions. And in order for that to happen, it's not some miracle, it is a change in gene expression, and that's exactly what got me into measuring all this stuff in the first place. You see someone sitting in a wheelchair for 10 years with MS. At the end of a weekend workshop, she's walking around the front of the room and hadn't been out of that throne for 10 years. You start thinking that that's just nothing. Something happened there. She downregulated the gene for MS, and she upregulated the gene for health. And she was taking yoga in a week, and she had never done that before. So I don't know the timing, because you don't know the individual case. And by the same means, you could have someone doing the work for 6 months. They come to a weekend event, they're practicing, they're ready, everything lines up, and they have their moment, and their eczema goes away, or their health condition changes dramatically. You know that there was a change in gene expression in that moment.
Do you think there's any validity to this? Well, I guess it's not an idea. I actually interviewed a neurosurgeon, and he confirmed this because he's opened up a lot of brains, but the calcification of the pineal gland, do you find that to be a barrier to entry for anyone that's been drinking fluoridated water their whole life?
Well, there's absolutely, I when I was in college and graduate school, I looked at enough x-rays, and even in practice, you could see the calcified pineal gland on a certain x-ray. And they used to use it as a biological marker. In other words, it measured the middle of the brain, and if it was off to one side or the other side, there was some space-occupying lesion, a tumor, something pushing it over, and it was always you always checked it to make sure there was nothing abnormal there. So it has become, in a sense, a marker, a radiographic marker, and you see them all the time. But I don't think the calcium is like a seashell. I think it's like a toothpaste consistency. I think it's more. I think it's the gooiness of the calcification and the density that creates it, and I do think that when energy is moving, I'm pretty certain that energy would definitely break those bonds,
right,
and begin to turn it into something.
In the
else.
same way that same energy directed consciously could heal a bone faster than it would normally if it was just left alone without any sort of healing intention.
Yeah, but think about this.
Into it.
Yeah. But think about those crystals as just stacked like this, and then you have a layer of goop in there, and they're all gooped. But when the energy strikes it, the energy is greater than the positive and negative charge that's holding them together. So it takes a greater force than the force that's holding them together to begin to dilute them into a solute, into a fluid again. And so my point is that I don't want anybody to get discouraged and think, oh my God, my pineal gland's crystallized, I'm separate from the quantum and I can't connect. And well, that's why we do the breath, we want to begin to have energy begin to stimulate it. And I do think that when energy arrives there, our brain scans show that there's a tremendous amount of energy going in there, and I have no doubt that it could break the salt into that kind of semi-solute substance into a more solution-based, less viscous material.
When you're doing the brain scans, are you guys doing SPECT scans or what?
No, we do quantitative EEGs.
Oh, okay, I see.
Yeah, and we'll just keep doing them because we now know that we can induce that state. We now know that we can predict when it's going to happen, and we now know that we can replicate it because it's the same. We see the same exact thing. We're kind of demystifying that mystical experience.
Right. If you can repeat the same experience over and over again.
Yeah, and if I see it in you, and then I see it in another person, I see it in another person, and I see, here we go, theta's getting big. Oh, it's way outside of normal. Okay, then all of a sudden theta becomes the carrier wave for gamma, and all of a sudden the person just they go right through high beta, right to gamma, and they're super coherent. And what so what happened to you? And they'll tell you the most profound experience. It's not, the subjective experience is being objectified, which is super cool because now it's becoming a law. That there's somehow, you say to a person, hey, why are you so upset today? Why are you so angry today? Why are you so frustrated? Why are you in a bad mood today? And they'll say, oh, I was at this place with this person or these people and these things happened to me and now I'm feeling this way and I'm thinking this way. What they're really saying is that person or that situation was actually controlling the way they were feeling and thinking. So when things go well in people's lives, they say, hey, I'm in a good mood. Yeah. When things aren't going well in their life, they say they're in a bad mood. So they're victims to the environment, right? So now, your thoughts and feelings actually produce an effect in your environment. And when you begin to realize that when you change how you think and feel, you change your state of being, when you change your energy, you'll see a change in your life. Now, you got to be able to sustain that. You can't have a great meditation or do something inward and then get up in 5 minutes, go unconscious again. You're taking that and you have to bring it into your life and be able to sustain it. So then the person who's responding consciously or unconsciously to the conditions in their life, they don't know they're being a victim to their life. They're saying, oh, I have this health condition or this is my life, until you start figuring it out, until you start knowing. So knowledge then becomes the forerunner to experience. So every time you learn something new, you make lots of connections in your brain. Not a little, a lot. An hour of concentration, you'll double the number of connections in your brain. From 1,300 to 2,600. But if you don't
I
think
did a
about
whole lot of hours of concentrating in my life, so
Yeah.
I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah, and look, the same, so let me finish that thought, I want to respond to that. So then, you're laying down philosophical circuits in your brain. The more you think about it, the more you fire and wire those circuits. The repetition of thinking about it begins to install the neurological hardware in your brain in preparation for an experience. So the more you understand what you're doing and why you're doing it, then the how gets easier. So I now know, after all the research, you give people the right scientific information, and science is the contemporary language of mysticism, and they can turn to the person next to them and explain it, because that's what you'll do. I'll say, now explain that. If you can't explain it, it's not wired in your brain. It means there's something now that's going to be conjecturous, something you're going to just have a little superstition about. You're not going to really understand what you're doing and why if you can't explain it.
If you can't explain something simply, you don't understand it well enough.
That's exactly. But when you can explain it, the model of understanding, you have the hardware in place.
Yeah, you've digested it.
You set up the conditions and put people in the experience. If they get their behaviors to match their intentions, they're going to have an experience. Experience then enriches the circuitry, but the end product of the experience is the payoff. And that's the emotion. When you start to feel unlimited, when you start to feel abundant, when you start to feel free, now your body's getting the chemical instruction to understand what your mind was understanding. Now you're embodying the knowledge.
And then you do it again.
There you go. And then all of a sudden you start to master the philosophy, and over time then, you begin to create a state of being. That means that you've memorized an internal state. It's subconscious, it's a skill, it's a habit. And you know that you know how to do it. You don't have to think about it any longer, right?
Yeah.
So our job then is to start as philosophers, then initiates, then masters. Knowledge, experience, wisdom, mind, body, soul, thinking to doing to being, learning with your head, applying with your hands, knowing it by heart. And so when people follow those steps, we're starting to see this 4-minute mile thing go on. And then if I get somebody on the stage and I say, tell them your story. And the lady says, well, I'm from Holland. I had stage 4 cancer. The doctors told me I wouldn't live more than 3 months. I tried these things and nothing worked. And I just went to the event in Mallorca. I'm here in Cancun for my second event. I have no cancer in my body. Now there's people in the audience with cancer, and they're looking at her and they're saying, well, she doesn't look like a movie star. It's not a Hollywood version of a great. She had some bumps along the way, but it's evidence. And when you start seeing that kind of piercing of that 4-minute mile, that level of consciousness, that footprint is there in consciousness for people to step into. But by the same means, there's evidence in 3-dimensional reality. It's no longer dinner conversation. Yeah. Hey, did you see that lady with stage 4 cancer from Holland? She didn't look any different than me. She didn't look like a vegetarian. She didn't look like she worked out every day. She just looked like an average person. So everybody starts relating with that, and you look in the audience when that person's telling the story, and there isn't a person looking away. They're all leaning in to watch this because, again, evidence becomes the loudest voice.
When you record your meditations, there's your voice, which is very hypnotic at times. Some of them you go super hypnotic, which I like because it's kind of trippy, the energy center, and it really helps you drop into it. But then there's also these backing tracks. Are those neuroacoustic tracks that help with the brain entrainment, bringing you into theta, or are they just pleasant sounding music?
Okay, so that's a great question, Luke. So we've actually studied what goes on with music during meditations, and there has to be a kind of music that's layered, that where no sound could distract you, no ambient sound. You can't hear anything. You hear that kind of full sound. And we notice that when music doesn't have pauses or breaks, but it's layered, then the person will get immersed in their inner world. If we use binaural beats or we use certain things like that, I'm certain now that it's not the beat that's doing it, it's the mathematics of the beat that's doing it.
Right.
So we started noticing then when we're getting people in certain states that even when I said certain words, we could see 14 people go into gamma at the same time. They'd be like, oh, that was amazing. You should have seen that. And they show me the scans, the scientists show me the scans. So then the other thing I noticed is that I started picking more complex mathematical music. And I could time my voice in a way with that music. And I've never told anybody this.
Cool.
I would and I got somebody entrained, and then instead of saying it when they expect me to say it, I don't. After I've done it for a period of time, I wait a little longer, and they're doing it by themselves, subconsciously, starting to move, anticipating what I'm going to say, but I don't say it then. I wait another mathematical round or so, and I say it again when I do that.
This is when you're doing the recordings?
Yeah, or when we're doing it
Or
live.
Okay.
And then all of a sudden, I see the persons, they're starting to go there before I go there. It's the mathematics and the entrainment and the pace. And then just moving, they're waiting, and it doesn't come when it comes to the next one. They're already doing it before I do it. They're developing the skill of doing it. They don't know they're doing that. So then we start doing that consistently, and then as I have longer periods of time in the way that I do it, we notice that beta appears as we experience time, more time. Like, we notice time is a big deal. When you're in alpha, time seems a little bit longer. You're in theta, you got a lot of time. Everything just slows way down, right? The time out here is still the same, but your relative time is just a lot slower. So then by drawing the time intervals a little bit greater, I can entrain a slower brainwave pattern. So we've just kind of studied the technology.
So you've tweaked with it as you go and keep refining it.
Yeah. And I got a couple great musicians, and I love participating in all of that and being a part of it. Yeah.
I mean, one of the most fascinating things is the video of being at a hospital with someone laying on the bed that has cancer like tumors, and you can watch the tumors disappear.
Yeah.
That's just...
Yeah. And it actually...
Explain how that happens.
Wow. Okay.
Because there were people standing around, and there was a...
Yeah. So I've seen that video. So the video shows a tumor in the bladder, and it's in China, and there's a group of physicians that come in and they chant something like it's already gone, or we give thanks that it's already gone. They keep chanting the same thing, and they keep creating the emotional state, and you see that tumor shrink.
Yeah.
Right in front of your eyes.
It either shrunk or disappeared, but it shrunk.
Here is the tumor, right here. The black is the emptiness of her bladder. This is the tumor. And now they take a snapshot for reference, a snapshot now. Okay, this is the real time. So this is now reference.
So here's the science behind that, and I'll give you an understanding. There was a researcher from Yale University in the 1940s that was very, very passionate and interested in studying the electromagnetic fields around living organisms. Now, in the 1940s, nobody was doing that. He was just a different guy. So he started off studying eggs. And when he was studying eggs, chick eggs, different types of bird eggs, salamander eggs, lizard eggs, reptiles, amphibians, 100% of the time, he always saw the positive charge where the head was and the negative charge where the tail was. Now, if you have positive charge on one end and negative charge on the other end, you have a magnet. So that magnetic field is actually in the shape of the egg, exactly.
Okay.
So he starts measuring, he starts quantitatively analyzing all these eggs, and then he goes right to women with the propensity for uterine cancer. And he starts measuring their electromagnetic field around their body as well as around the organ. and he starts noticing the same exact patterns for uterine cancer. And every single woman that had a pattern in the field that he measured had a pattern in the physical body of cancer. But there was a certain percentage, though, that had some in the field but didn't have the cancer in the body yet. But they ultimately developed the cancer. So he was looking at matter, thinking there's a glow of, with his measurements, matter's emitting a field.
It's a frequency that
But it's not the
no?
case. It's actually the field that's creating matter. So change the field, and you change matter. So think about
Like
that.
the environment, are you saying?
No, let me say it again. The women with uterine cancer had a certain pattern in the field, right?
Yeah.
So then he starts seeing the women with uterine cancer. Every one of those women that had uterine cancer had a pattern in the field that was the same. Change the field, you change matter. And we do this in our workshops, and we've seen tumors just like that disappear.
A lot of our degenerative disease, it's largely due to our domestication of ourselves, and our
lifestyle,
our disconnection from natural light and from grounding and from being disconnected from our environment, sort of turning ourselves into zoo animals.
Yeah, I raised 3 kids, and that was just the deal that I had with them. You can do technology, but you got to do something in nature. Whether you surf or you kiteboard or you rock climb or whatever those, they all do something. But it was a great way for them that they could just lay their phone down for a day or for 6 hours and surf or do whatever, rock climb, and just not have a thought about their phone, right? Just disconnect from technology and be out, in that open space, in that nature. And I think it's a really healthy thing for us to remember.
What do you mean change the field then?
Okay, so there's only 2 components, according to the research, that shows how to change the field. Here's an example. They did an experiment where they took a group of people that were great healers. And they took these vials of DNA and set them out in front of these people, and they said, now listen, this is a mindful function. With all of your intention, we want you to see this DNA wind or unwind in your mind. Just keep seeing it wind or unwind, wind or unwind.
Okay.
So they did it over and over again. They checked the DNA. Guess what happened? Nothing. Intention did nothing to change the DNA.
Okay.
So then they said, okay, open your heart, create an elevated emotion, and just feel gratitude and radiate that feeling of care and love into the field, and let's see if that changes the DNA. They elevate their emotional state. They do it for a period of time. They check the DNA. Guess what happens? Nothing. But when they say to the people, what I want you to do is see the DNA unwind, intention, one frequency, the electrical charge in the quantum field, and feel the emotions you would feel as if it already unwound, elevated emotion, magnetic field in the quantum. Over 20% of the DNA unwound at a remote location. So thought being the electrical charge in the quantum field, feelings being the magnetic charge, how you think and how you feel broadcasts a field. So now, not just any type of field is going to do that. It's got to be coherent. So we practice creating brain coherence. We actually measure it. We practice creating heart coherence. Why? Because once energy moves right up in here, and you can change resentment or frustration or impatience to joy, to freedom, to gratitude, and we're measuring to see if you're doing it. I could say to you, Danica, you're doing it, or I could say, not there yet, gotta keep going.
How do you measure it then? Just maybe as a side note?
It's called an HRV, heart rate variability monitor. We put electrodes, and we actually see where we clip things to people's ears.
Okay.
So now when the heart starts regulating, it starts beating like a drum. And it starts to produce a measurable magnetic field that's up to 3 meters wide. Now, that energy is a frequency, and that frequency can carry information, and that information is your thought, is your intent. In other words, the elevated emotional gratitude can carry the thought of your health. The emotion of suffering cannot carry the thought of your health. It carries a different set of thoughts. So you can think positively all you want, and if you're feeling miserable, your mind and body are in opposition. So we teach people how to put these 2 coherent signatures together. The thought sending the signal out, the feeling drawing the event back. But the more coherent, the more organized the signal, the more connection you have to the field.
By organized, do you mean concise about what you want, or do you
No,
mean
like
just
rhythmic.
being good at it?
No, like rhythmic. Like,
okay.
So coherence is a synchronization. As an example, when people are under the gun of the fight or flight nervous system, they're living by the hormones of stress, the arousal of those chemicals drives the brain into a faster brain frequency called high beta brainwaves.
Okay.
In high beta, the arousal, you're in survival. What you're trying to do now is control and predict everything in your life.
Right.
And so you start thinking about your boss, your coworker, your boyfriend. You start thinking about the groceries. You start thinking about where you have to go, all the things you have to do, finances. And every one of those things, elements, people, places, has a neurological network in your brain. So as you shift your attention very quickly, you're activating those circuits. And like a lightning storm in the clouds, your brain starts firing very incoherently. And when your brain's incoherent, you're incoherent. At the same time, you're stepping on the gas, your heart's racing because of survival. You're stepping on the brake, like I can't throttle my coworker even though I want to. So you can't fight, and so now the heart starts beating incoherently. So how do we reverse that? So we teach people how to create more order in their brain. And there's a formula that we practice, and when they do it right, the brain starts getting very organized. Those different compartments that were subdivided start to synchronize.
There's a rhythm even to the firing.
Oh, there's like we have unbelievable measurements of rhythm. So now think about it. So now, all of a sudden, those different communities of neurons that were out of sync start synchronizing, and what syncs in the brain links in the brain. And all of a sudden, you start seeing more and more neurons start dancing to the same rhythm. They start synchronizing like a symphony. And when that starts to happen, when they start getting more organized, if you think about coherence like a group of people clapping in an audience, say there's 1,000 people, and you say normal coherence for an average human being would be every fifth person in the audience clapping at the same time.
Right.
Super coherence, what we're measuring, imagine 100 billion neurons all synchronized. So now 1,000 people all clapping at the same time, not only is it creating more order, but it's creating more energy. So now waves start stacking up on top of each other, and all of a sudden you start getting more energy in the brain, more synchronization, and all the areas that were no longer in balance start to come together. And the side effect of that is now the person starts feeling more whole.
So it's an important element then to address the emotional part, because there are events in our life that cause us to feel certain emotions, and we peer through the lens of our senses through those emotional states, and in a sense we're thinking in the past. So the body, if the body is conditioned emotionally into fear, it's believing it's in the same environmental condition, whether it's real or not. And so the body then, in a constant state of fear, is not a time to metabolize. It's not a time for long-term building projects. It's not a time for growth and repair, eliminating, assimilating. It's emergency. The cell shuts down. So it's important for the person. We've seen this so many times in our research. Then that they're sensitized to everything in their environment because they're mobilizing all this energy for some threat in their outer world. They don't have the energy in their inner world for growth and repair, and so they're sensitive to everything. And it's their emotions that are actually weakening and downregulating the whole system. So then you throw in electromagnetism, which is now the fourth kind of stress, and the person's sensitized, then you will see them sensitized to things in their environment because they're more prone or more victimized to their environment. And yet, when you recalibrate, we've seen this thousands of times. People break free from fear, and all of a sudden their digestion changes, their pain levels go away, their vision improves, their acid reflux goes away, their insomnia changes. It's just the system gets freed from survival, and now the body moves back into homeostasis, moves back into balance. So I'm not saying that diet's bad. No, I eat well, and I take care of myself, and I exercise. It's all important, but in fact I react. But the question is, how long are you going to react? That's the real question, right? So being able to piece it all together for a bigger model, I think it helps people then to be more sensible about a bigger picture. Well, with frequency, it's about exposure.
Right.
You take your cell phone, it's a transistor, you place it up against 78% water, and you got a wave coming through your brain, and you keep doing that over and over again. You do that for 20 years. The frequency is going to regulate different proteins. You stand in front of an x-ray machine over and over again, and you work in an x-ray lab, and you're not taking care of yourself. The exposure over time is going to mutate DNA in cells. So with frequency, it becomes a function of exposure, right? And so Again, I would say then the person that is more coherent in their energy, more coherent in their heart and brain coherence, may have enough of a field effect to disseminate or deflect some of that. But again, that's just a speculation.
Yeah, well, I think it's pretty spot on, because I know many people that are just kind of unaware of a lot of this stuff, and they don't seem to be affected by it. And I know a lot of people that are very concerned about it, and the neuroses of the awareness is almost a double jeopardy, net negative effect, because it's like now oh my God, that glass of water had fluoride and
the moment you judge it, the moment you judge it before it happens, you're creating you're deflecting either what slit the photon's going to go through. I mean, you're making a choice, right?
Right.
So, but I mean, it's there. You can't deny that there are, that on the average person that falls in that bell curve of normal, or to the person who has a weakened immune system that's in the low end of the bell curve, or the person who's in a neurotic state that they're afraid is going to be bad for them, the fear of being afraid of what's going to happen. Actually, the body's belief is happening to them. That's why they're afraid. So the body's more susceptible because it's believing based on the fear that it's already happening to them. That's makes them more prone to effects.
You were talking about energy. You're talking about the heart and things of that nature, and it makes me think of, the 7 chakras and the energy centers. And what is your understanding with that and how they play a role in and how you
So I use the word energy centers because if you say chakras, some people will have the wrong understanding of them. Or
right, I agree. I think it's fantastic that you try and make sure that this is digestible and attractive and not off-putting to anyone, right? There's no point in using religion or spirituality, right? It's just science. And as far as, this goes, it's not chakras and, ceremonies and drumming. It's rhythm, it's frequency, and of course, as we're talking about here, energy centers.
Yeah, so I like energy
Whatever
centers.
you want to call it.
Yeah. But it's cool because these different energy centers of the body are centers of information. They have their own frequency, they have their own energy, they have their own little individual brains, believe it or not. They have their own hormones, their own chemicals.
Wow. You can measure that they have different hormones?
Oh, absolutely.
Each energy center?
Every one of them.
And there are 7?
There's 7, Well, there's 8, but 7 ones in the body. So those different circuit boards are under the control of the autonomic nervous system. Now, stress creates imbalance in the autonomic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is switched on for one reason: emergency for preservation. So then you're mobilizing enormous energy to preserve the body, and it should be a short-term thing. The other nervous system, the parasympathetic, is for growth and repair, right? So some people spend the majority of their time living in that high frequency of stress. So then teaching people then how to make a move from that sympathetic system into the parasympathetic system means they have to practice on a daily basis certain fundamental principles. And for me, I think that, more and more people are doing it.
How do you do it?
So, when a person begins to slow their brain waves down, they have to go, when you're in stress, when you're in survival, you narrow your focus on a cause. That's called what's called a convergent focus. So now you're blessing the energy centers of the body. They're under the control of the autonomic nervous system. And when the autonomic nervous system moves out of balance, the brain moves out of balance, right? We narrow our focus on the cause, and it causes each one of these different energy centers to move into incoherence as well. And those little individual brains start moving into incoherence and send an incoherent message to the cells and tissues and organs. Hormones then become downregulated, and the body starts moving out of balance. So when we bless the energy centers, or we reprogram these energy centers, 2 things has to happen. They have to be able to slow their brain waves down. They have to get out of that high beta state. And the way we do it is to go from a narrow focus to a broad focus. When you open your focus, when you open your awareness, that's what creates coherence in the brain, because you're going against that habit of putting your attention on matter. So there's a convergent focus, which is focusing on matter, and then there's a divergent focus, which is focusing on energy. Well, reality is both particle and wave, matter and energy. So if a person can slow their brainwaves down from beta brainwaves to alpha brainwaves, now they're starting to fall out of their thinking brain right into the home of the autonomic nervous system.
Okay.
If the person can't change their brainwaves, it'll never work because they're in their neocortex in their thinking mind, right? So that's one thing that has to happen. The second thing that has to happen is that they have to practice both a convergent focus and a divergent focus.
So by the convergent, you're focusing on, let's say I'm going to focus on this
That
energy
center,
center,
right.
right? And then you move your focus to another energy center.
Well, first you focus on that energy center, that's particle, and then you focus on the space around it, that's wave.
Okay.
And so when you open your awareness and you're able to do that and you're in your autonomic nervous system, you can put an intention there, which will create more balance in estrogen, more balance in your sexual organs. You move to your second center, you put your attention there. That's where you place your attention is where you place your energy. So now you're beginning to direct energy into that center. But now you become aware of the space around it. Why? To create coherence in that little brain. Send the coherent message to the cells and tissues. Go to your third center, right in the pit of your gut. Well, there's a huge celiac plexus there, a solar plexus, a lot of connections in there. So now put your
That's a
attention.
big one.
That's a big one.
Always getting a lot of signs there.
Yeah.
Here and here.
Yeah.
Heart and solar plexus.
Yeah, those are big ones. And you tune into that energy. Then you put your attention in your heart. It has its own individual brain.
Yeah.
And when you make energy here, when energy finally arrives here, guess where it goes automatically? Straight up. We've measured it. So now once you start opening your heart, you get more energy in your heart, you get more energy in your brain.
Got it.
And
Short on time, just go straight to the heart.
That's why we do it. That's exactly why that's why we open the heart. So it creates a field and it begins to drive energy to the brain. So now that energy is going to cause the person to have a different consciousness, a different thought pattern, right? And now they're going to be thinking possibility, because in survival, the first three ones are all about survival.
Yeah.
It's really not a creative process of creating from mind. It's more about a more primitive, humanistic part of us, animal part of us. So then there's the thyroid plexus, the pineal gland, the pituitary gland. So we've seen when people create coherence in each one of these energy centers and they do it properly, they know how to change their brainwaves. They get into the operating system. They can master convergent and divergent focus. They're no longer living just this way. They've practiced opening their awareness and focus on energy, becoming conscious of it. And as these brains become more coherent and they start producing different signals to hormones and chemicals and to different glands in the body, that's what's being upregulated to make different expressions. We see things like colorectal cancer change, prostatic enlargement, prostatic cancer, impotence, diverticulitis, uterine tumors, acid reflux, food allergies, high liver enzymes, heart palpitations, arrhythmias.
Pretty much anything.
Yeah, well, each one that's related. A lot of Hashimoto's syndrome, thyroid
Got it.
conditions.
Oh, so they're related to an energy center.
Each one of these are an energy center. That's what
And they hold the information for, let's say, diverticulitis, or they hold the energy for...
Well, why is the cells and tissues and organs functioning out of balance? So you can't control that with your conscious mind. You got to get beyond your conscious mind and stay conscious in your subconscious mind. And that's what we do when we slow our brainwaves down. But we don't want just any kind of brainwaves. We want coherent brainwaves. So then there's a coherent message to the cells and tissues.
One of the things that I do when I meditate, which I don't do nearly enough, but I try and do as much as possible, is I breathe into each of those energy centers and just feel for resistance, feel for tension. If there is, then I breathe some more. It's not probably nearly a thorough enough process, but I can intuitively feel where there is some resistance, and then I breathe into it. Also, interestingly enough, I don't know what you know about crystal bowls and alchemy and sound healing, and if that's something you've ever explored, but I went and did a session where I chose the bowls, and I had no idea until I was done that the bowls, they have their own notes, and when I listened to the bowls to pick them, because it was like a 2-hour intuitive process, and I would close my eyes and she would play the bowl, and I could literally tell you, I was like, whoa, my heart's like on fire. Like it related, since it is a note, musical note, it related to an energy center, and that is exactly how it works. I'm like, wow, I can feel exactly where it's hitting.
Right, and
fascinating.
And your awareness contributes to that, because as you become aware of those energy centers,
Yep.
what you're actually doing is you're entraining that center to a harmonic of that frequency. And these are called hormones for a reason, because you
Oh.
can begin to harmonize them. And we do that, we practice. We
Yeah.
have, I think, 8 now different energy center meditations that we do. That's an evolution of the last one. And we teach people how to program them, how to create more harmony in them, how to, and we see a lot of changes in their health.
Yeah.
There's something that happens when people make up their mind. You know, I think your body is a community of cells that's spying on your brain. And I think most people, when they're making up their mind to do something, they're sitting on the couch, they got their laptop, their cell phone, their tablet, they got the big screen TV, they got the remote control, and they're like, I think I'll change tomorrow. And the body's like, he's lying to himself. He's not changing. And when we make a decision now, like I studied enough people, Luke, that had a transcendental moment and a healing that was a result of it. They just made up their mind, and they came up against this constant belief that this could work for everybody else, but for me, and that's what's stopping them from having the experience, right? So it was natural for them to just say, "I'm going all in," and it kind of that making up your mind. They made a decision with such firm intention that the amplitude of that decision carried a level of energy that caused their body to respond to their mind. It was greater than the hardwired programs and the emotional conditioning in the body. And the choice that they make became the moment in time that they would never forget. That's the moment they knew that their healing would begin. That was the moment that they did it with such a level of emotion and energy. The stronger the emotion they feel, the more they pay attention to the choice. And they're moving their brain and body out of their past present reality into a future present reality. The body's getting a sampling, a taste of the future emotionally. And they're aligned. And the healing begins in that moment. And they show up with that kind of intensity. That they're not analyzing. They're not thinking in their waking day, why isn't this working? Why am I this? Why am I that? They're in pursuit. They're in pursuit of it. They're staying away from their same thoughts. They're staying away from the way they do certain things. They're staying away from certain emotions. They're paying attention in their waking day. What is it? If that pain had a feeling, what would it be? You know, they're inquisitive. They want to know. It's information there. What am I not seeing? Am I coming to the point where I should go a little further, trust a little more? And so to the outsider, when you see the person who has the healing, you would think, oh, that person's just lucky, they popped, But what you don't know...
That's the way I think about it.
But what you don't...
I see someone get out of the wheelchair, and I'm like, I just have a sore back. I can't even get,
Yeah.
It's like, cut me a break here, God. What the hell, man?
So here's the last point. So that person who has that moment, that powerful moment, you would think that it was just the moment, but what you don't know is what they've been overcoming for the last year, and what they've been doing, what they've been laying on the line, what they've been changing. And so I can tell you also that many people, the pain doesn't change. A lot of times it's almost like an irritant to keep them looking at themselves. It's an irritant, a disruption that's causing them to pay more attention. What am I missing? It's that kind of inquiry, the discomfort, and looking deeper sometimes is what the subconscious wants. It wants the big release, right? It wants the whole thing. And I said this in the lecture. I mean, I watch people say that I just thought I was doing my meditation wrong. I was so frustrated. I was so this. I was so that. And I realize that they're at the end. They're right at the end. They're doing it right. And they're just going to go one more time. And they're not going to care. They're just going to say, I got to go one more. I'm not going to get up. I'm not going to give up. And they just go that extra time. And then here's the release. Here's the breakthrough. So I think it's a lot of different variables. I think it comes with a new energy. I always go fresh. When I'm stuck, I just go fresh, and I also go back to the basics. I go right back to the meditation of breaking the habit of being yourself. I write down my thoughts. I write down my reactions emotionally. I write down my behaviors. I write down what I'm saying every day. I want to get conscious of all that, because if I'm going unconscious, and I'm trying to get this, but I'm not paying attention to all the unconscious stuff, you can think positively all you want. But if your body's programmed into negativity, that thought's never going to make it past the brainstem and program the autonomic nervous system. So I think it's a good thing when this happens, especially for healthy, health-minded, physically healthy, emotionally healthy person like you. It's almost like there's got to be something there that keeps you engaged. It's got to keep you going. And that's happened to me, too. I've worked on things, my God, for 2 years. And I just stopped after a certain point in time looking for it. I didn't even care. I got so involved in the effort that there was no separation between the thought and the act. Actually, the effort, the act is what created the experience. I wasn't looking when it was going to happen. I was too engaged in what I was doing. I was all in, right? And so we kind of freshen that up a little bit. We go at it a different way. The whole entire time I'm changing. And the whole entire time I'm getting so happy with me that all of a sudden I don't even care any longer, and I forget that it all of a sudden changes, and it doesn't even matter any longer because I'm okay now, right? I mean, so I don't know how to explain. You can only talk, around this. It's a kind of an interesting thing, but I always see it, discomfort or irritation, as us to look deeper and go a little further.
If there's an artifact of irritation even after someone's had a fairly large-scale remission of something, do you think that perhaps it might be a little karmic hook that's kind of just left in their in their field to kind of keep them engaged in the fight, so they're not just like, cool, don't have to do those meditations anymore?
Well, we see people go like, oh my God, I just had the most incredible experience. 90% of my pain is gone. And then somehow that's what keeps them there. That's what keeps them engaged. That's what keeps them going. So I don't know what keeps people going. Some people, they need something. That we need some adversity. We need some challenge in our life to stay conscious. To stay aware. So I think it's a laundry list of complex things. It's a list of complex things. But when they all come together, that nodal point, that moment where it all lines up again. We see people that have that experience and they're completely healed and it never comes back. But now they're ready to create a job and they're on to the next thing. And then we see people that over time heal their condition and then they start going back to certain emotions and they see their condition starting to come back again. So they have to work a little harder and shaving it down and staying there. Sometimes when the people have the instantaneous ones, usually it's permanent. I mean, it really is. I mean, they're just different. They're just different to the core, all the way in.
Meditation is such a huge part, and obviously we've talked about that quite a few different times. How frequent do you need to be meditating, and how long? We're talking about making a difference.
Yeah.
How about making a difference in your life?
There's so many variables. It depends on how sick a person is, how incoherent their brain is, what type of trauma that they're healing from emotionally. There's a lot of variables. What their lifestyle is, their ability to pay attention and focus, to understand information. There's a lot of different variables. But let's just say that it was someone like you or me that wanted to produce some type of change in their brain and body. There's 2 times the door to the subconscious mind opens up. When you wake up in the morning, when you go to bed at night, your brain waves just fluctuate. You go from beta to alpha to theta to delta when you go to sleep at night. Yep. When you wake up, you go delta, theta, alpha, beta. So when you wake up a little early, you're kind of in low-level alpha or theta. You're between worlds. Perfect time to meditate because you have to work as hard to change your brainwaves. You're already kind of there. And so if a person can actually know the formula of how to change their brainwaves, you can do a very healthy, good meditation for 45 minutes to an hour. The problem with most people is they find so many instrumental benefits from doing it that they're not waking up like, oh God, I gotta meditate. Okay. They're waking up like, I can't wait to do it. So it's instrumental for a lot of people. So most people in our community spend about 40 to 60 minutes that do it. Some people spend a little bit longer if they're working on activating latent systems for a mystical experience or whatever. But I'm not a big fan of a 5-minute meditation. I'm not a big fan of a 10-minute meditation unless it's just for a moment to stop and get grounded. I think you can go to deeper and deeper levels, and when you start making a path, carving a path down into that subconscious. The important point is like when you're going down that path and all of a sudden there you go, you make the right and you're with your ex and you go, oh. The best thing to do is back up and go down again. That's a victory. That's a victory right there. You became conscious. Then all of a sudden you start thinking about what you have to do at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. All right, you back up, you start heading down again. That's a victory. Most people don't have the patience to do that because it's tedious in the beginning. Now,
Neuroplasticity.
you
Gotta
keep doing
working
that.
on it.
You keep doing it. You carve that path right down the subconscious. The nerve trunk is going to get bigger. It's going to produce a bigger road because there's more traffic going on it. Now, the person's able to get there a lot faster, and they could have a great meditation in a half an hour because they know how to change their brainwaves.
Right.
Now, I've been doing this a long time, and I have sat with myself for hours. And sometimes you just have to work really hard because you got people, you got meetings, you got to travel, you got contracts, you got all these things, you got family, and you sit down to meditate and your brain is just going to the future or the past, and and you have to.
It takes a while to get it centered.
And if it takes me an hour to get there, I don't care if it takes me, I will not get up. I'm just not that type of person until I'm there. I just will not. And every time I go past that point where I want to stop, you know, that point where you just go, I've had enough, and you just go,
a little longer.
You go a little longer. You step right into the unknown.
You're really good at pushing. The only way to the other side is through, and there's no growth unless there's pain. I say that all the time.
But discomfort.
Discomfort.
Yeah, because change is leaving the known, and leaving the known is
I love that. You talk about that so much. The
It's
discomfort. Sit in it. You have to.
You have to. And listen, you have two choices when you get into that discomfort. And I've learned this just in the last few months in witnessing some really cool things we're doing right now. If you move into the discomfort and you run back to the known, but you're not conscious that you're doing it, you just throw in a program, just do what you know how to do because it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Now you just return back to familiar territory. And that's a program. People do it. So they run some habit, they run some program. The other choice is in that discomfort to apply the formula. And apply it with your eyes open, because that's where we're going. Because we have students that can do it with their eyes open as well as their eyes closed. Now, what's the significance of that? No person, no thing, no experience in your life is going to take your joy away. You could have 1,000 reasons that day to be unhappy, and you're going to self-regulate.
Because you know how to do it with your eyes open.
Exactly right, and that's where we're going. We're going there because we want people to stay conscious.
Wow.
And that's the moment that matters the most. So now, we've done so many great studies to see that our community can really create brain and heart coherence, right? They can do it in a meditation. It's quiet, it's in the room, it's beautiful, there's music playing, there's 1,000 people. Now, let's take them out in a situation, put them in a situation where now they could feel fear of some discomfort, and it's real. And it's no longer, hey, you create your reality. And that's not a moment you want to hear.
You thought you had discomfort sitting around in the room for another 10
let's
minutes?
Step it up. Let's step it up. So we put them in situations now where they normally feel fear or some strong emotion, where they want to throw in a program. Like, I got to rush through this. And we say, hey, why don't you apply the formula right now? So then the person has to, with their legs shaking and everything going on, they start settling their body down. They start mastering their fear. And so when they return back
are they meditating in public?
No, their eyes are open.
While they're just like zoning
they're
out.
Practicing brain and heart coherence with their eyes open. That's the next stage, because when they return back to their life and they face off with some challenging situation, they'll apply what they did and they won't fall from grace and not throw in a program, and they'll open their heart and go against thousands of years of fear that's been programmed into a human being.
To saving your life.
For that reason. And all of a sudden the person now has a new tool. Then they get back to their life and they've just done something really outstanding, and they look at the challenge in their life and they see it as minimal compared to what they just did. So their perception of the way they see the world changes. And so the person then starts liberating enormous amounts of energy. You know, there goes all the fear, and they have really profound moments. So we want to always press the envelope. I'm just that type of guy.
There's something I have not heard you talk about, and in our last couple minutes here, I wonder if you could touch on it, because many of the listeners have been like, ask them about this, ask them about this. And I don't know if you're comfortable talking about it. Apparently someone heard you say it at some point, but that there have begun in recent years or months that there's visitations kind of in some of the events from energetic beings or something that is kind of non-material and that is perceivable by multiple people, not just in your head or something like that.
Yeah, well, those fractal patterns, Luke, are really doors. They're dimensional doors. And the more organized and the more coherent and the more beautiful they are and the more complex and whole, the greater the consciousness is accessible to, more wholeness appears. And so there are numerous accounts, and I'm not this type of swim with the dolphins type of guy. I mean, I'm not that kind of.
I get that.
I'm
That's
not
why
that
I was
person.
surprised.
And when I started seeing him, and I started seeing what was happening, and then people started recounting their experiences. I mean, their experiences. Here's the deal. The being that shows up and grabs the lady's leg and shakes the lady's leg, she said he had no interest in me at all. He just wanted to shake this out, and I was saying to him in my mind, you do realize that hurts. And he didn't stop, and he sent her the thought,
That's
the
hilarious.
pain's got to come to the surface, And then another person that had all these other crazy health conditions, from arrhythmias to skin cancer to constipation to shoulder problem to anxiety. The beings show up and they say, hey, remember when you hurt your shoulder 22 years ago? We're going to work with that first. And the same count. They grab it and they start shaking it. And she's like, ow, yeah, it's got to come to the surface. Then they say, remember the time you had the ectopic pregnancy? Yeah, I forgot. Well, they put your intestines in them properly. We're going to work with those. Hey, remember after 9/11, living over there, how you were so stressed out and traveling? Well, your nervous system is out of balance, and then they work with her nervous system, and she feels them, and then hey, you've had this cancer, and on your skin, and they start rubbing her skin, the whole entire skin, and then your heart, they take her heart out and they put it back in, or this crazy thing, and here's the deal. She's a high-functioning businesswoman, successful, that's not really spiritually minded, and what's the important point for me? Well, that lady who they shook her knee and her hip and twisted her from side to side, her legs were going all over the place while it was going on, and she's a big lady. All her pain went away. Now, the lady with the skin cancer and the arrhythmias and the shoulder problem and the constipation and the anxiety, none of that, she hasn't had a palpitation, she hasn't had an arrhythmia since. She has had no shoulder pain. Her elimination is perfect. All her skin all of a sudden started scabbing, and all these things started falling. I really don't care. I really don't care what the person's subjective experience is. It's incidental to the effect it produces in their biology, right, or in their life. That's really more important. So you may say that person has a vivid imagination. Really? Well, that was really vivid. So vivid that it epigenetically signaled new genes for health and downregulated genes for disease. I mean, that's how monumental it was.